welcome back to my channel. I'm here with another book video today. This is going to be episode number 2 in my Reading Books from Around the World challenge. If you missed the intro, I will link it up above, but I have decided to challenge myself to read a book by an author from every country in the world. Episode 1 was an intro, and the last 2 books that I had to finish off North America. In today's video, we're going to be focusing on South America. I've picked just 4 countries from South America for this video, so there will be a couple more parts focusing on South American authors. Today we're focusing on Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, and Colombia. So those are going to be the 4 countries that I've chosen. I'm going to walk you through the books that I've picked and kind of give you the rundown and the stats on them, and then I will give you updates as I read them on my thoughts of these different books. So first off, we're actually going to start with Bolivia. The book that I chose to read for Bolivia is Juan de la Rosa by Nathaniel Aguirre. Hope I'm saying this right. And it is translated by Sergio Gabriel Weisman. Just forgive me on the names. It is 300, well, depends on the thing. Goodreads says it's 368 pages. My copy of it is only like 309 pages. So it depends on the version of it that you get. The average Goodreads rating is 3.29. So there's some of your quick stats on that. Basically, as a quick synopsis of this book is a memoir of the last Bolivian rebel, essentially. That's kind of how they pitch it. It is, as far as I can tell, a fictional memoir, so I don't think that this Juan de la Rosa person is actually a real person, but I could be wrong. If somebody knows more about this, please let me know in the comments down below. From my understanding, the author is was, I don't know if he's still alive, is a politician in Bolivia, and he wrote this book kind of with a made-up character. Basically, you're just following the life of this Juan de la Rosa character and how he became involved in the Bolivian independence movement and kind of his life story. I am about halfway through this book already, and I will say I've been pleasantly surprised so far. It's been really easy to read, but I'll wait to give my full review until I have finished it. That is my pick for Bolivia. The next book that I've chosen for this video is from Argentina, and this is The Promise. First of all, I just want to close up on this cover because look at how cool it is. Isn't that just the funnest cover? Anyways, this book is from Argentina. It's called The Promise. It is by Silvina Ocampo, and the translator is Suzanne Jill Levine and Jessica Powell. So we've got 2 on this one. It is 103 pages, so nice and short, and its average Goodreads rating is 3.67. A quick overview of this book. From what I can understand, it's about a woman who passes out and falls off of a cruise ship, and basically comes to in the water watching her ship leave her. And so she is kind of reflecting on her life as she thinks she's about to die. And I think you kind of get a stream of consciousness narrative of her just thinking about her life. Potentially, I feel like I read something somewhere about how she's praying to some god, but I don't know if that's a real thing. That might have just been something else. I read a lot of Goodreads reviews and summaries researching for this video, so that might not be this book. But this is The Promise by Silvina Ocampo. Then the next one that I plan on reading is my pick for Colombia, and this is Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and it is translated by Gregory Rabassa. It is 120 pages, and the average Goodreads rating is 3.97. This book basically is kind of a man coming back to try and solve a cold case type of a thing. It's basically, there was a murder that took place, and not too long before that, this woman had gotten married, and her new spouse basically returns her to the family in disgrace, and the brothers threaten to kill him, and then he ends up dead or something like that. They intend to kill her lover. That is the reason that the groom returned the bride, essentially, and then the lover ends up dead. But nobody ever really looks into it. You don't know why when lots of witnesses heard them threaten to murder this guy. In addition to that, this author is known, I can't quite remember the term for it, but he's a fantasy realism fantasy, something like that book. Magical realism, there we go, that's the term. He is a magical realism author. So I believe this book is written in the magical realism style. If you watched my last video, you will have seen that I read Pedro Paramo for my Mexico pick, and that author is who inspired some of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's writing style. So this will be a fun little follow-up to the Pedro Paramo. From my understanding, his is a little bit more of a cohesive plot than the Pedro Paramo book was, so I'm excited to see what this book turns out being. Then the last book that I'm going to read in this video is my pick for Chile, and that is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. It is translated by Magda Bogen. Hope I'm saying her name right. It is 448 pages and the average Goodreads rating is 4.27, so this one's highly rated. I also have the prettiest cover of this book, and I don't know if you can tell, but it's almost like copper, and it's really cool. But this one seems kind of more like a family epic, I think is the best way to describe it. You're following several generations of the Trueba family. Sure, I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And you're just kind of following through their lives. From my understanding, there's also a member of the family who is in touch with the spirit world and can speak to spirits. So I'm sure that that plays a role in kind of the story of their family. But that's pretty much as I know about this book. I don't know that it has a super strong plot line that is easy to just sum up. It's not just a quick little snippet of a plot line, because it is like a family epic. So that's the last book. This is my pick for Chile. Again, this is just 4 of the countries in South America. There's obviously several more, so I will have a couple more episodes of South American countries. If there is a book that you know from a country that I didn't do in this video and you want to leave a comment for me down below, that'd be great. I do not have books found for all of them yet, so if you have a book from a South American author that you think I would read, or even if it is from one of these countries, I'd still be interested in reading other books from these countries as well. So if you have other recommendations for me by South American authors, I would love to see them down in the comments below, and I will come and update you throughout the month as I read these books with my thoughts. Alright, it is time for a bit of an update. I have actually finished 3 of the 4 books for this video, so I thought I'd talk you through kind of my thoughts on them before I finish reading the last book. The first one that I finished was Juan de la Rosa. This one ended up getting a 4 stars from me. I was actually very pleasantly surprised with how interesting this book was. For being a historical fiction book, sometimes those are hit and miss. This one was really well written. I thought that the characters all had really fun personalities, and those came across in a fun way in the writing. To give a little bit of a better description than I gave before I'd read the book, basically you're following this kid, Juan, who lives in this small little mountain town in what is now Bolivia. At the time, it was kind of upper Peru area. And you're following kind of how the revolution happened in his town. So this is not like a history book that's going to give you a great general overview of everything that happened in the independence movement in Bolivia. This is very much so centered around this stuff that was happening in that one specific mountain town. I will say I think that I would have been able to enjoy the book a little bit more had I given myself a brief overview of the history of how their independence movement went, because this doesn't give you a lot of the details and it just starts mentioning other events that are happening, but it doesn't really explain them. So I think it'd be helpful if you had kind of a background of what was going on in the history of Bolivia becoming a nation. This one does surprisingly only cover a few years. I think he's 8 at the beginning of the book and he's 12 at the end, maybe something like that. The main thing that brought it down from 5 stars for me is the ending is so crazy. He basically is but yeah, you'll see how this all turns out for me. And then it just ends. I'm is there a second book that I don't know about? Or are you just supposed to assume? Occasionally he'll mention his current life. You know he becomes a captain at some point. We know Bolivia does eventually get independence, but you never get to that point in the book. So that really was the main thing that knocked it down for me, is I kind of would have liked to see like the rest of his life, which is a good thing because I was interested enough in the character to want to know like the rest of his story. But I will say, if you're looking for a super satisfying ending, you may have to go and do research elsewhere on the Bolivian independence movement in order to get like a satisfying ending. So that's Juan de la Rosa. I thought it was really fun writing, really easy read actually for being a historical fiction. So if you're interested in branching out into another genre or into learning just a little bit about like Bolivia and getting some really fun descriptions of the like mountains there, which sound just beautiful, I think Juan de la Rosa is a good read. Alright, after that I picked up The Promise, and I have to say this is probably my biggest disappointment so far. I love the cover. I thought it was such a good concept, but this book really just kind of let me down. I gave it 2 stars, and I kind of have a hard time giving it 2 stars because I know it's like a super popular book that a lot of people seem to really love, and a lot of people really seem to love this author. She is mainly a poetry author, and I think if you liked poetry, you'd probably like this book more than I did. I'm just not like the biggest poetry person. I kind of like reading largely for plots, and so this one really doesn't have a plot. If I were to describe this book in like a sentence, I would say this book is like the book form of people watching. Basically, as she's like drowning in the ocean, she decides to go through and have all these like memories, like she's recounting her life story basically, but she's doing it through like people she knows. So you never get to know the actual narrator or like the lady in the book. You're just getting to know all the people that she knew throughout her life. And so it's literally just jumping around in no specific order, just whatever order they happen to come to her mind as she's going delirious in the ocean. And then she just describes them. She's not describing really events. It's super just random what information you get about them. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. That's all the book is. You don't even know if in the end, you can kind of assume she gets rescued at some point, because there's one point in the book where she like talks about making it to wherever she was going and then having to leave immediately because she got sick from being in the ocean. So presumably she gets rescued, but at the same time also presumably she dies at the end. So I don't know. It's not like chronological order. It's totally just like train of thought, whatever people she ends up thinking of, and then she just describes them. So this would be a really interesting book if you like were wanting to do research on like character descriptions and how to describe people. It's also really interesting because I feel like a lot of her descriptions are just very crude, I guess would be the word I would put for them. It's just, I don't know. It's not like we're beautifying humanity. She's just kind of very blunt, and like these are kind of all of their worst features about these people, sort of. So I don't know. If you really love poetry, or if you've like read her other stuff and you like her writing style, you might find this interesting. From what I understand, this is her longest work, so which is really short. So she's definitely more of a poet person, so it felt a little bit more like reading poetry. Like you probably could have picked this book up and just read like a couple people and then left to come back to it and read a couple more people and read it kind of more like a poetry book, treating like each person like a poetry or like a poem. But to sit down and like read it cover to cover, it's just not that interesting. It's not my cup of tea. I do really love the cover though. I think it's still stunning book. But I don't know that I'd highly recommend this unless it was somebody who like was really into poetry. Then the last one that I finished is Chronicle of a Death Foretold. This one I ended up giving 3.5 stars. It definitely gets points for writing. I think it's a really well written book. It's kind of a fun story. The interesting thing about this is it's totally like a murder book. Like you're reading about the murder of a guy, but you're taking like a literary fiction view on it, not like a murder mystery. This is not a mystery book in any way, shape, or form. It's like, basically the whole concept is that this guy gets murdered. Everybody in the town knew that these 2 boys were setting out to murder this guy and nobody did anything to stop it, and he still gets murdered. You're just like, why? Like, which is the whole point of the book. Like, the whole point of the book is to be like, why, if everybody in the town knew, did this murder still happen, when it totally could have been avoided if any one of them had just like taken responsibility and been like, oh, I'm gonna go tell him not to like go out there because he's gonna get murdered. And that's like the whole point of the book. Like, it explains everything that happens the whole day leading up, like the whole week, honestly, leading up to this murder. Like, everybody in this small little town knew, and the guy still dies. And it's just like, if you read a lot of murder mysteries like I do, it's kind of anticlimactic, because you're like, what is going on? Surely he didn't need to die. You're just waiting for like some twist, some like crazy thing, but it just doesn't happen, because the whole point of the book is just to be like, why did nobody step up? I will say there were a couple times where this book almost got gross in how detailed it was explaining some of the stuff. Like, I don't want to go into detail on here because I found it gross, but just if you get queasy about like blood and injuries and things like that, just be aware that there's a couple times where they're explaining the murder in great detail. They're explaining the autopsy in great detail. So just a heads up on that if that is something that makes you squeamish. There was a couple times where I was like getting quite grossed out by this book. But it is super short, super quick read. If you're into like, I don't know, again, I think this would be one if you're like just curious about people and how people think. It is an interesting one. If you're really into literary fiction, I think you'd enjoy this. Just don't go into it as a murder mystery. The back of it almost sounds like he's trying to like figure out how this murder happened, but we know he's just like wondering why nobody stepped up is really more of the mystery. And so you're going around and getting the reasons why each person just didn't say anything and the guy still died. So that's Chronicle of a Death Foretold. And then the last one I have to read is The House of the Spirits. I am currently about 47 pages into this. So I think I already explained in a previous clip what this book is about. But this is my last one for this video, and then we'll do kind of a final wrap up when I finish this book of all of my thoughts on this book. Alright, it is time for a bit of an update. I, unfortunately, have decided to quit reading The House of the Spirits. In book terms, I guess I've DNF'd it. I got to page 132, so I'm a bit of a ways into it, but I just don't think I can finish this book. My big thing, I don't mind the writing style. Like, I think she's a great writer, and I think there is a reason she's really popular, and I think lots of people probably could get through this book. But one of the main things that seems to be driving the book so far has been sex as a theme, and I just don't want to read that much into books. Nothing's like crazy explicitly described, but it just like, that's the only thing. It's about this guy. It's very old-fashioned, and I know that probably a big point of this is to comment and give some commentary on kind of the old-fashioned ways that people used to live. This guy is like a major landlord, and he is well known for sleeping around, not claiming his children. He's raping girls that live on his farm, and everybody just doesn't say anything about it because he can threaten to kill anybody who has anything to say differently. And like, I get that this is how things actually used to go a lot, and people who were working as slaves and or servants on people's big plantations, that was a part of life back in the day, but I just can't handle reading a book like that. So I don't know, if stuff like that doesn't bug you as bad, you might be able to get through this book and really enjoy it. And I'm sure at some point that kind of changes, because it's got to change points of views, because at some point I believe it becomes more about like his granddaughter, and you like follow a few generations, so it probably gets better at some point, but I just can't get through it. So I don't know, maybe at some point in my life I will feel like that is something that I can handle reading. And as my husband pointed out, he grew up in Las Vegas, and he had required reading for school that was worse than this. So if you've read things, I think the example he was giving was Brave New World. So if you've read things like that, you could probably get through this book. And it's nothing against her writing. I would still be interested in picking up another one of her books. So if there is another book by her that doesn't have that as its main as one of its main themes, let me know. I'm not opposed to reading another book by her as long as it wasn't that centered around sex and stuff like that. So I am gonna put this book down. I'm not going to finish it. I'm not gonna count this as my book for Chile though. So if you have a recommendation of another book that I should try from Chile, if it's by her or another author, I'm gonna keep researching it. I haven't found anything that's super readily available where I'm at, so I'm just gonna put a pause on reading a book from Chile. But in order to still do 4 books in this video, I did end up going and getting The Alchemist. So The Alchemist was my pick for Brazil. I know I'm gonna say this guy's name wrong. My husband has told me several times how to say it, but Paulo Coelho? Something like that. I know it's pronounced, like the H is pronounced different in Portuguese. So I don't know. But this one's kind of become a classic book. It is, I guess let me give you the rundown. So this is The Alchemist. It's my pick for Brazil. It's by Paulo Coelho? Something like that. It is translated by Alan R. Clark. And it is, at least in my copy, 171 pages. Goodreads marks it a little bit different than that. And the average Goodreads rating is 3.9. And this book is basically about this boy who gets this, he's like a shepherd in Spain, and he gets this dream that he's going to find treasure at the pyramids in Egypt. And so he sets out on this great quest to go and try and find these pyramids. And during this quest, he kind of starts to learn about alchemy. He meets an alchemist, and he starts to learn kind of about the principles of alchemy. I have actually already finished this book, so I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was a good book. It's definitely like a slower, you're gonna get more out of this book if you really take your time to sit and think about it. I definitely probably could have read through this slower and actually like annotated the book. It's very philosophical, I guess is the way I would say it. It definitely is a book that if you really wanted to take your time with it, you could probably do a lot of interesting introspection based off the concepts in this book. So I thought it was good. It's definitely not like a super intense plot or anything. It's just kind of him going on this journey. There's lots of self-discovery, lots of stuff about like following your dreams and what it takes to be someone who's going to pursue a dream even if everybody tells you that it's not worth it or it's not possible. So it's definitely a good book. I would recommend it. It's, I don't know, I don't really have any critiques of it. It just wasn't, I don't know, I have a hard time giving such short books 5 stars because I feel like you could always do more with it. I don't know, it just feels like they're always so simple, like you just can't do that much in that few pages. But I do think that this was a really good introspective book if you want to get a book that's going to make you think. So that is my first foray, I guess, into reading books by South American authors. So just as a recap again, I've got Juan de la Rosa. I give that one 4 stars. The Promise, I gave that one like 2.5 stars. Chronicle of a Death Foretold, I gave that one 3. Wow, I can't remember what I gave these books anymore. Okay, so The Promise was 2. Chronicle of a Death Foretold 3. House of the Spirits, I did DNF. So obviously that one doesn't get a rating. And then The Alchemist, which gets a 4 star. Now for my favorite part, I get to update my spreadsheet. So if you missed the first video, I have a spreadsheet that I'm using to track all of my books for this challenge that I'm doing. And that has bumped me up to 8% of all countries. So that percentage goes up very slowly. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have read any of these books, I would love to know your thoughts. This would be a fun conversation. Again, if you have any books for Chile or for any of the other countries in South America that I didn't read in this video, I would love your recommendations. The only one that I have found a book already that I think I'm going to read is for Ecuador. So I do have a book for Ecuador. I'm still open to recommendations. Again, I'm also open to recommendations from these countries, especially if you have a good one from Argentina. I'd love to find a book that I actually enjoyed from every country. So I would be interested in reading another Argentina book. So again, if you have any recommendations of South American authors that you would recommend that I read or specific books, please leave them in the comments down below. I'm super excited to keep going with this challenge. There's definitely going to be more videos coming out soon. I'm hoping, I think my next video might be Southeast Asia. look forward to that. That will be coming hopefully soon. We'll see how quick I can get books gathered and read and stuff. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed these videos, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.